10 Disturbing True Hiker Stories from Appalachia, Untold Fears. Introduction. The Appalachian Mountains stretch across more than 2,000 miles of rugged wilderness, forests, and valleys. They're breathtaking, timeless, and deeply mysterious. Hikers have long spoken about eerie encounters, unexplained phenomena, and strange people who lurk far from civilization. Tonight, we're diving into 10 disturbing true hiker stories from Appalachia. These tales come from real people who braved the trails, and came back with nightmares they'll never forget. So, grab a blanket, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for Untold Fears. Story 1. The Vanishing Footsteps. A seasoned hiker named Marissa was exploring a remote part of the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. She had set up camp for the night and was settling into her tent when she began to hear footsteps circling her camp. At first, she assumed it was another hiker. But when she unzipped her tent and looked, no one was there. The footsteps continued throughout the night, pacing, circling, pausing right outside her tent, then starting again. In the morning, she checked the ground for tracks. The dirt was soft, muddy even. But there wasn't a single footprint. Story 2. The Silent Man of Shenandoah. In the Shenandoah National Park, a young couple hiking together encountered a man sitting silently on a rock. He was dressed in outdated clothing, worn boots, suspenders, and a wide-brim hat. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't acknowledge them when they greeted him. They passed quickly, unnerved, but later that evening, as they set up their tent, they spotted him again, standing just inside the tree line, watching them silently. When they tried to approach, he melted back into the woods without a sound. Locals later told them there have been repeated sightings of the Silent Man for decades. Story 3. The Screams in the Smokies. A solo backpacker named Daniel camped in the Great Smoky Mountains. Around midnight, he woke to the sound of blood-curdling screams echoing through the forest. At first, he thought it was an animal, but the screams had words, desperate cries for help. Daniel debated rushing toward the sound, but fear rooted him in place. The screams grew closer, circling his camp, then suddenly stopped. At sunrise, there was no trace of anyone in distress. When he reported it to rangers, they told him hikers sometimes hear phantom screams, voices carried from nowhere. Story 4. The Stranger Without a Backpack. Near the Georgia stretch of the trail, two friends encountered a man walking in the opposite direction. He was oddly clean, his clothes crisp, and he carried no water, no pack, nothing. He smiled at them but said nothing as he passed. Later that evening, they saw him again, miles down the trail, walking slowly behind them. They hurried their pace, and when they turned back a second time, he was gone. Other hikers have described similar encounters, an impossibly fast-moving stranger who always appears where you least expect him. Story 5. The Whistling in the Hollows. One night in West Virginia, a group of hikers heard whistling coming from the hollow below their camp. It was a strange, repeating tune, soft at first, then louder, closer. When one of them whistled back, the forest went silent. Minutes later, the whistling returned, this time from behind their camp. They stayed awake the entire night, too terrified to investigate. When they finally left at dawn, they realized the whistling had followed them for miles. Story 6. The Watcher Above the Waterfall. A hiker named Anthony decided to cool off at a secluded waterfall in North Carolina. As he swam, he felt eyes on him. Looking up at the ridge above, he saw a figure standing perfectly still, watching him. "Anthony," called out but got no response. The figure never moved. He grabbed his pack and left quickly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone followed him for the rest of his hike. To this day, he refuses to return to that waterfall. Story 7. The Cabin That Shouldn't Be There. Two hikers in Tennessee swore they stumbled upon an old log cabin deep in the woods, far from any marked trail. The door was ajar, and curiosity got the better of them. Inside, the cabin was filled with old tools, broken furniture, and a rocking chair that slowly creaked back and forth, though no wind touched it. When they fled back to the main trail and reported the cabin to rangers, they were told no such cabin existed in that section of the forest. Story 8. The Disappearing Boy. A father and son hiking together spotted a young boy in overalls standing ahead on the trail. The boy didn't speak, he just stared at them, then darted into the trees. They tried to follow, fearing he was lost, but when they reached the spot, there were no footprints, no sound of movement, nothing. Locals whispered about a boy who went missing decades earlier in that very area, his body never found. Story 9. The Lights in the Mountains. Hikers in North Carolina reported strange orbs of light weaving through the trees at night. At first, they thought it was other campers with flashlights, but the lights floated silently, darting between trees, and even lifting high into the sky before vanishing. The hikers left in a panic, later learning about old Appalachian legends of ghost lights, said to lure travelers off the path. Story 10. The Voice in the Fog. On a foggy morning in the mountains of Kentucky, a lone hiker heard a voice calling her name. At first, she thought it was a trick of the fog. But then the voice repeated her name, clearer this time, and coming from multiple directions at once. Terrified, she bolted down the trail, the voice chasing her through the fog until she reached an open clearing. She never hiked alone again. Closing. The Appalachian Mountains are beautiful, but they are also vast, ancient, and full of mysteries we may never fully understand. From phantom voices to unsettling strangers, these stories remind us that the wilderness is never truly empty. So the next time you hike in Appalachia, pay close attention to the sounds around you, because something, or someone, may be watching. This has been Untold Fears. Stay safe out there, and remember, the scariest stories are always the true ones.